Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome to On the Middle East, Al Monitor's podcast on the big and interesting stories in the region. My name is Amran Zaman, and today I'll be revisiting the Iran-Israel conflict. It's been nearly a month since the United States intervened in the conflict, striking Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran retaliated with an attack on a US base in Qatar. President Donald Trump brokered a ceasefire soon after, claiming that Iran's nuclear sites had been obliterated. With us here to discuss the current state of play is Professor Mohsen Milani, the author of the recently published Iran's Rise and Rivalry with the US in the Middle East. So welcome to our program, Professor Milani.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you.
So what is the current state of play between Iran, Israel, and the United States? We had a very dramatic turn of events with Israel physically attacking Iran and Iran hitting back, and then the Trump administration coming in with its bunker busters and hitting nuclear sites, only for Trump then to very quickly secure a ceasefire. So what is the state of play currently?
I think the best word I can describe is state of confusion and unpredictability. Iran has entered into a very dangerous and unpredictable phase, and it is not easy to predict what is going to come out of this, because what took place in Iran in the past 3 weeks is really unique in history of the Middle East and perhaps in the history of the broader region. That is, we have a clear case of a member of the NPT to be attacked by two nuclear powers. The United States, a declared nuclear power, and Israel, which is an undeclared, but everybody knows that Israel is a nuclear power, against a member of NPT during negotiation between the United States and Iran. So that is unique. Now, what happened is that initially, it seems to me that the plan was to attack, Israeli plan, supported by the US, was to attack Iran and try to, A, destroy Iranian nuclear facilities or destroy as much of it as possible, but at the same time, to sort of eliminate the top echelon of the Iranian military, and hoping for perhaps either a quick regime change on the top, or hoping that the Iranian people and those who oppose the Islamic Republic would take to the streets and stage a sort of a regime change. And of course, to sort of diminish Iranian power and to diminish its ability to defend itself. Well, in the first 24 hours, Israel scored a major, and I have to be honest with you, an impressive military victory. It showed that they had penetrated the Iranian intelligence at the highest level. They eliminated about 20 of the top Iranian military officers as well as top scientists. They attacked a number of important facilities. But then, and here comes an equally interesting part of the story. Iran was attacked, surprisingly, and Iran was able to recover very quickly, in less than 24 hours, and started attacking Israel. And that was, I don't think, expected by either Israel or the United States. And of course, the war went on for 2 weeks, and then President Trump called for a ceasefire. I have to be honest with you. I've read and I've heard a lot about how this was a major victory for Israel, or some Iranians claim that it was a major victory for Iran. I think it's too early to make a judgment. Tactically speaking, I think Israel scored a major victory. There is no question about this. But at the same time, Iran showed the resiliency of the Islamic Republic and its ability to recover from an attack and then strike back. I submit to you, and I think you as an expert in the Middle East would agree with me, I can't think of a single Middle Eastern country that would have been able to withstand what happened to Iran. It showed its resiliency, and it showed that its offensive capability is not diminished as much as people thought it was.
And is that why you believe that President Trump acted so quickly to put an end to it? So having done that now, what are the next steps? I mean, can we say that diplomacy is in play right now?
I think there is no other choice for either Iran or for the United States. If you look at the history of military strike against against aspiring nuclear power, you can see that oftentimes when you attack a country like Iran, whose nuclear technology has been spread out, the exact opposite of what you expect can emerge. Let me be very specific about this. I wrote a piece 2 weeks before the attack by Israel. It was published in Foreign Policy. And in that piece, I essentially argued, if you attack Iran, you are going to most likely strengthen the most radical elements of Iranian leadership. B, I said, most likely you're going to see a revival of Iranian nationalism, because no people in the world like to see their country being attacked. And finally, I said, you're going to see a more popular demand for Iran becoming a nuclear power. So far, all of this has happened. But that does not mean that diplomacy is dead. I think there is no other way but a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear program. And therefore, I am cautiously optimistic, much less than I was 2 weeks ago, much less. I have been a defender of diplomacy for many, many, many years. But what happened in the past 3 or 4 weeks, I think, has changed the dynamics of Iranian politics. And who knows what is going to come out of this mess. But at this time, when I look at the options, another military attack on Iran, or Iran going completely dark and developing a nuclear bomb, if they can do that, or diplomacy, I would say the diplomatic route is still the least dangerous and most beneficial option available to all major powers concerned about the future of the Iranian nuclear program.
Well, that's clear. I mean, that diplomacy would be the least dangerous path forward. But is there room for diplomacy given the very sort of uncompromising stance on both sides?
You know that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that any deal with Iran is going to be unacceptable to Israel unless, A, there is zero enrichment in Iran, B, unless there is drastic limits on Iranian missile technology, making it almost impossible for Iran to reach Israel with its missile, and then an end to Iranian support for so-called proxies, Iranian proxies. Well, if this is the position the U.S. is going to follow in these negotiations, I agree with you. I think we're going to reach a dead end. But I'm hoping that there could be some way of reaching an agreement that is win-win for the U.S. and win-win for Iran. Unfortunately, there is this perception that Iran has become too weak, and therefore we can impose any kind of deal we want on Iran. And I think this is short-sighted. Even if even if we have an agreement that meets all the demands of Israel and the United States, I assure you, no government can survive in Iran if they capitulate to these demands. So we have to find a compromise on enrichment as well as on other issues. My way of looking at this is that one way we can reach an agreement is to expand the topic of or the concern of these negotiations. So far, the focus has been exclusively on the nuclear issue. Perhaps one way we can expand the horizon is to include attempts by both Iran and the US to move toward normalization of relations. And there, I think both countries can find a way to find a win-win situation for this impasse. Remember, the war lasted 12 days, and so far, according to everything I have seen, we have not eliminated Iranian nuclear program. It has been damaged seriously, but we have not damaged it. And what guarantee do we have that if we attack again, we're going to achieve that goal?
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
Well, you said that you had predicted in your foreign policy piece that any attack would reinforce the most radical elements of the regime. And if I'm understanding you correctly, you're suggesting that's exactly what happened. So if that's the case, how can there be room for compromise? And my second question is that you said the people rallied around the flag, which is the conventional consensus around this issue. But doesn't that also mean that the regime has to do something to sustain that going forward, meaning make some meaningful reforms if it wants to keep the people, if not on its side, at least not as violently against it as they may have well been before these attacks took place? Don't you feel that the regime is nonetheless threatened at some level?
Excellent question. And if you don't mind, I do a little bit of self-promotion. In my book, Iran's Rise and Rivalry with the United States in the Middle East, in my conclusion, in the last 2 or 3 pages of that book, which was written before the end of Assad regime in Syria, before Hassan Nasrallah was killed. So it's very important to put the time context here. My conclusion was that Iranian rise is unsustainable, that Iran needs to change its regional perspective and regional policies. I argued that the Cold War that started between Iran and the United States in 1979 after the Islamic Revolution, and between Israel and Iran, which started around 1990, Iran cannot win that war. Iran cannot win it, and I explain why Iranian rise is unsustainable. I explain it in terms of 3 or 4, I remember 4 major factors. But at the same time, and that goes back to your question, at the same time, I argue that the Shah of Iran reached the pinnacle of his power in 1979 in the Middle East. He was perhaps the most powerful figure in the Middle East. His problem was that he did not have domestic support. And I concluded in that book, the last paragraph of my book is that even if Iran makes the necessary changes in its regional policy, unless they make fundamental reforms inside Iran, that is to open up the political process, end repression, free these political prisoners, etc., Iran's rise is going to be remembered as nothing but a short footnote in Iran's long history. Even if Iran agrees to make some changes in its regional policies, even if they do that, unless the Islamic Republic reforms its internal governance structure, until and unless they have reconciliation with a large segment of Iranian society, Iran's rise will be remembered as nothing short of a very small footnote in Iran's long history. Therefore, I think your observation about the necessity of reform domestically is absolutely well taken. I agree with you. They need to do that. Now, regarding the first question, the necessity of a compromise, I agree with you. While the hardliners are in power, but it is only the hardliners that can compromise with the United States and get away with it. Remember, it took Richard Nixon, the most anti-communist president, to open the door toward communist China. And it will take the Iranian hardliners to finally agree to negotiate with the US and find a diplomatic and honorable way to address Iranian nuclear impasse.
But as you said, however much the nuclear program took a huge hit, it still hasn't been completely destroyed. The know-how is still there, and therefore we can well imagine it resuming at some point. And of course, that's of huge concern to Israel. So given that, and knowing that Benjamin Netanyahu is probably the least compromising politician on this planet, especially when it's to do with his own survival as he sees things, and with this Trump administration in place, isn't there a real risk that we could return to war?
Absolutely, there is that weirdness. No question about it. And the way you have framed this is very accurate. Yes, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu is demanding publicly. What he wants privately, we don't know. But it is also important to remember this conflict is not between Iran and Israel alone. It's between Iran and the United States, and it is in that context that Israel becomes important. So we have to look at, yes, what is good for Israel, but also what is good for the United States. And I'm not very sure that President Trump is willing to get engaged in another endless war in the Middle East. Look, I think it is fair to say that we tried to change the regime through bombardment. It didn't happen. Now, what makes you think that if we attack again, it's going to happen? It could happen. I used to speak with great deal of confidence about the future of the Islamic Republic. I don't anymore, because we have entered into an uncertain and uncharted waters. I have no idea what is going to take place. But what I can tell you, if there is another attack by either Israel or the United States, or a combination of the two, and if Iran retaliates, then there is a good chance that Iranian retaliation is going to go beyond just attacking Israel. It could involve Iranians attacking some other facilities or attacking American interests in the region, which then would launch the region into a regional conflict. And I don't think anyone, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, the Persian Gulf countries, Turkey, I don't think anybody would like to see that. And therefore, I think there is going to be a lot of pressure both on Iran and the United States to accept a diplomatic solution for it. In a way, I'm pretty sure that one lesson we have already learned is that through bombardment, we cannot achieve the goals of non-proliferation. There must be a diplomatic way to address this. And that's why I think cooler heads will eventually prevail, and Iran and the United States will move toward a peaceful and diplomatic solution. And then Israel, I think, is going to eventually accept it. But you are absolutely right. There is a possibility of an attack on Iran again. It is a serious one. And I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you, if it happens again.
Well, at the same time, we also see the European Union threatening to reintroduce sanctions under the snapback provisions of the JCPOA. So obviously pressure coming from there as well. And of course, there is this idea out there that maybe you can starve Iran into submission, that you can, for example, attack its oil facilities and, of course, in doing so, paralyze its economy, and that this will set off a chain reaction whereby the people do, in fact, then rise up. These are all scenarios that are out there, but you seem to believe that cooler heads will prevail and that diplomacy will win the day. I certainly hope you prove to be accurate in that assessment, Professor Milani. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for tuning in. And for more in-depth coverage of the Middle East, go to our website, www.al-monitor.com.